You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your PMP certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. This lab is structured as a laddered set, 3 scenarios that grow progressively more challenging. The goal across all of them remains the same: identify the best next action. The difficulty level changes, but the disciplined rhythm does not. Each case requires you to pause, consult the right artifact, run impact analysis, and then act through the correct governance path. The design is intentional. Easy questions confirm that you can anchor yourself in artifacts. Moderate ones test whether you protect cadence while honoring compliance. Hard ones stretch you with contract terms and incentive structures. The artifacts that may appear across the set include the familiar scope, schedule, and cost baselines, as well as agile backlogs, change logs, risk and issue registers, and the requirements traceability matrix. Procurement scenarios will call for statements of work, contract clauses, and incentive figures such as the point of total assumption. Your task in each case is not to memorize answers, but to see which artifact governs the decision. That is the reliable anchor under exam pressure and in project delivery. Here's the pacing tip to carry throughout this lab. If you are uncertain, lean toward the option that analyzes impact and checks the correct artifact before escalation. This heuristic is nearly universal. Escalation has its place, but only after you have facilitated alignment and gathered evidence. PMI expects you to demonstrate stewardship and professional judgment, not reflexive delegation. With that in mind, let's begin with the first, easy scenario. Difficulty. Easy. A predictive project has delivered a scope item. The sponsor smiles and says, "Looks fine, let's sign off." Quality assurance, however, flags that acceptance criteria evidence is missing. The sign-off meeting is in just 2 hours. No defects are currently known, but the lack of evidence is real. This is a textbook case of temptation. The sponsor's intent is clear, and you are under time pressure. The artifacts to consult are the scope baseline, the requirements traceability matrix, the acceptance criteria, and the test results. These will reveal whether the deliverable is truly complete. The options might tempt you in different ways. One suggests signing off based on sponsor intent. Another proposes verifying acceptance criteria and traceability before sign-off. A third recommends escalating to the steering committee. A fourth quietly suggests adding tests after sign-off. You can probably hear the traps: appeasement, premature escalation, and hidden work. Only one aligns with governance. The exam is not asking what would make the sponsor smile. It is asking what protects process integrity while still keeping pace. The best next action is to verify acceptance criteria against the RTM, collect the missing evidence, and then sign off. This preserves traceability and ensures quality is visible. Approving on intent alone undermines the baseline. Escalating to the steering committee wastes time and skips facilitation. Adding tests secretly after sign-off destroys trust. The correct choice honors the artifact, gathers evidence, and closes the loop cleanly. This is why easy questions matter. They test whether you will stay disciplined when the shortcut looks inviting. The transfer lesson is equally clear. In an agile environment, the equivalent step would be confirming the definition of done and acceptance criteria evidence during the sprint review. The heuristic is short and repeatable: artifact, evidence, acceptance. And the pitfall is equally short: intent is not acceptance without proof. Saying this aloud as a reminder cements it into reflex. Even on straightforward cases, professionalism means evidence first. At this stage, pause for a reset. Check your pacing, breathe once, and remind yourself: artifact, impact, policy. These micro-pauses act as shields against rushing. The first scenario is deliberately simple. The next one steps up difficulty by blending agile cadence with compliance pressure. You'll need to protect the sprint goal while responding to a new regulatory ask. The stakes are higher because appeasing one side will harm the other. This is where backlog policies become the deciding artifact. Difficulty: moderate. An agile team is mid-sprint. Compliance officers suddenly demand a new log format immediately. The sprint backlog is full, capacity is at the limit, and the sprint goal is already under pressure. The temptation is to insert the new work and hope the team can absorb it. Others suggest pausing all sprint work to run a compliance spike. Another camp argues to ignore the request entirely until the next release. Each of these extremes sacrifices either cadence or compliance. The artifacts to check are the sprint goal, the backlog policy, the definition of done, and the compliance register. The disciplined response is to negotiate a swap with the product owner. That means reaffirming the sprint goal, protecting the definition of done, and scheduling the compliance slice transparently in the backlog. The backlog policy is the agreed mechanism for urgent requests. By following it, you respect cadence, avoid burnout, and still acknowledge compliance needs. Inserting new work without a swap destroys rhythm. Pausing the sprint breaks cadence. Ignoring the request disregards compliance. The balanced path is policy-driven. Backlog swap, goal intact, compliance addressed in sequence. The key lesson here is that cadence and compliance are not enemies. They must be harmonized through visible policy. When artifacts like backlog ordering and compliance registers are used openly, stakeholders see discipline rather than obstruction. This scenario also reveals the hidden pitfall, treating capacity points as promises rather than planning aids. Protecting cadence requires educating stakeholders that policies exist to balance urgency with quality, not to slow things down. By applying backlog swaps properly, you demonstrate that agile governance is real governance. Another pause is useful here. Remind yourself of the heuristic: goal first, policy swap, quality intact, log decision. This is the spoken sequence that protects you from either appeasing or stonewalling. The exam loves this trap because many candidates confuse responsiveness with rule-breaking. True responsiveness is rule following under urgency. With this reset, we can now step into the final hardest case: procurement with incentive contracts and penalty risks. Difficulty: hard. A vendor working under a fixed-price incentive fee contract requests an interface change. They insist it carries no impact. The testing window is narrow, penalties are possible, and time is short. The temptation is strong to approve verbally to keep things moving. Other options include rejecting outright, allowing the change and fixing paperwork later, or requiring written impact analysis with formal contract modification. The artifacts to consult are the statement of work, the acceptance criteria, the incentive terms, the PTA figure, and the contract change clause. The correct action is to require a written impact analysis, check risk against the point of total assumption, and process a formal modification. Only after this is approved should baselines and test plans be updated. Verbal approvals, outright rejections, or backdated paperwork all break governance. The exam is probing whether you will honor contract mechanisms under pressure. The right answer respects artifacts, preserves test windows, and protects both organizations by keeping incentives aligned. Professionalism in predictive procurement means no modification, no change, always with evidence first. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. When the second scenario asks you to manage a compliance request mid-sprint, it deliberately pushes you into a tension many project managers face, balancing cadence with new obligations. The exam writers know that candidates often equate responsiveness with saying yes immediately, even if it means breaking rhythm. But agile discipline is not about always saying yes. It is about saying yes through the right artifact and the right process. The sprint goal, the backlog ordering policy, and the definition of done exist for this reason. They turn urgency into structured adaptation, not chaos. The temptation in this case is to insert the new compliance work straight into the sprint. At first glance, it feels responsive and even professional. You are meeting an external demand quickly, but the hidden cost is cadence. Once you accept work mid-sprint without a swap, the sprint goal unravels. morale drops, and the precedent is set that rules are optional. Another option is to pause the sprint entirely and run a compliance spike. That may sound thorough, but it destroys rhythm and undermines trust in sprint commitments. Ignoring the request until the next release looks like protecting cadence, but it disregards compliance entirely. The balanced response is to negotiate a swap through the product owner. The sprint goal is reaffirmed so the team's purpose remains intact. The definition of done ensures that no shortcuts are taken. The compliance slice is added transparently, and something of equal weight is dropped or deferred. This preserves both cadence and compliance. Stakeholders see that their request is respected, but the team's sustainability and governance are also protected. It is an example of policy in action. The backlog policy is not just a guideline, it is the artifact that carries governance in Agile. The reflection here is that cadence and compliance are not competing forces. They are constraints that coexist. When handled transparently through backlog policies, both can be satisfied. The danger lies in treating Agile as ad hoc, assuming that speed means discarding rules. In reality, Agile is rule-heavy. It is the presence of strong backlog policies, sprint goals, and definitions of done that give stakeholders confidence. By applying them even under stress, you show that agility is not fragility, but discipline. The exam expects you to demonstrate this maturity. Moving to the third scenario, the difficulty level rises again. Here, procurement mechanics enter the picture. A vendor under a fixed-price incentive fee contract wants to make an interface change. They claim it has no impact, but testing windows are narrow and penalties are possible. This is where project managers are most tempted to act informally. Saying yes verbally feels fast. Rejecting outright feels strong. Allowing changes and promising to reconcile paperwork later feels pragmatic. But each of those responses breaks the principle that contracts are governance anchors, not suggestions. The artifacts you must open here are clear. The statement of work defines what was promised. The acceptance criteria clarify the boundaries of completion. The incentive terms and the point of total assumption show where financial risk shifts from buyer to seller. The contract change clause outlines the required path for modifications. These artifacts take the decision out of the realm of trust and into the realm of evidence. Once you consult them, it becomes obvious that no change is truly impact-free, especially under incentive contracts. The correct response is to require a written impact analysis from the vendor. This analysis must show effects on scope, cost, and schedule. You then review the PTA figure to determine if the change risks pushing costs into overrun territory. The contract modification path is followed, ensuring governance bodies approve before baselines and test plans are updated. Only after this approval is work allowed. This protects traceability, fairness, and delivery integrity. It may feel slower, but it is what sustains trust between buyer and seller. No modification means no change. Other responses fail for predictable reasons. Verbal approvals destroy traceability. Outright rejection without review damages relationships and may deny useful improvements. Allowing the change and adjusting paperwork later invites disputes when costs shift. Each shortcut erodes governance. By contrast, requiring analysis, following the modification path, and updating artifacts preserves both relationship and accountability. The exam expects you to show that procurement discipline matters as much as technical delivery. This hard scenario also shows why contract literacy is part of the PMP body of knowledge. You don't need to memorize every clause type, but you must know how incentive terms, ceiling prices, and PTA figures affect decision-making. These terms ensure risk and reward are distributed fairly. Ignoring them means governing by personality, not by evidence. Contracts provide the artifact-based path, just like baselines or backlogs do in other domains. The principle is the same: evidence before action, policy before improvisation. Reflecting across the laddered set, you can see how difficulty increases while the logic stays constant. The easy case tested whether you'd sign off on intent or wait for evidence. The moderate case tested whether you'd protect cadence while addressing compliance. The hard case tested whether you'd honor contract processes under pressure. In all three, the best next action was the one that checked the artifact, ran impact analysis, and acted through governance. The harder the question, the more tempting the shortcut, but the discipline remains the same. These cases also show how artifacts adapt to context. In predictive scope disputes, the RTM and acceptance criteria are your anchors. In agile cadence conflicts, backlog policies and sprint goals carry the weight. In procurement, SOWs and contract clauses provide the evidence path. The project manager's skill lies in recognizing which artifact applies and trusting it to guide the decision. This artifact-first habit is what saves you under exam timing, because it cuts through the noise and leads you directly to the correct path. Another layer of reflection is the role of escalation. In none of these three cases was escalation the right first move. Escalating to the steering committee, to compliance, or to executives before facilitating alignment and reviewing artifacts wasted time and weakened credibility. Escalation has its place, but always with a plan. The laddered set reinforces this. From easy to hard, the correct answers all lived below the escalation threshold. This pattern is deliberate. Exams want to see that you can handle pressure at your level first. Finally, these scenarios highlight the recurring heuristics you can carry forward. For acceptance, the phrase is artifact, evidence, acceptance. For cadence and compliance, it is goal first, policy swap, quality intact. For procurement, it is no modification, no change. These short reminders are enough to trigger the right chain of thought under stress. Practicing them aloud cements them into reflex. The laddered set proves that no matter the difficulty, these heuristics remain reliable. They are the backbone of professional judgment. This practice ladder is not just exam preparation. It mirrors the escalating complexity of real project life. Early in your career, you may face simple scope sign-offs. Later, you'll juggle cadence and compliance pressures. Eventually, you'll be responsible for procurement clauses with financial implications. Each stage requires the same discipline: artifact first, impact before action, policy path for decisions, and updated records for traceability. That progression is the ladder you climb as a professional. Practicing it here is rehearsal for the leadership expected of you in practice. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.